A great empire will fall. That was the cryptic message given to a king who asked a god for guidance, a message that sealed his doom and changed history. This is just one of the 30 incredible legends of divine prophecy we are about to uncover. We are embarking on a journey across continents and centuries, from the misty peaks of ancient Greece to the highlands of Scotland, from the deserts of Egypt to the islands of the Pacific. You will hear stories of oracles who guided emperors, seers who predicted the rise and fall of dynasties, and visions that warned of world-altering events. We will explore not just the prophecies themselves, but the immense power they held, the empires they built, and the destinies they forever altered. How much of our history was written by a whispered word from the gods? By the end of this journey, you will have a new understanding of the forces that have shaped our world and the timeless human desire to know what lies ahead. Did an Aztec god really lead his people to a promised land with the vision of an eagle and a serpent? What did a blind Bulgarian mystic foresee for our own future? These are the mysteries we will unravel. What is the one prophecy that has always captured your imagination? The story of King Croesus is a cautionary tale about the double-edged sword of prophecy. As the wealthiest man in the ancient world, ruler of the kingdom of Lydia, Croesus felt invincible. Yet a nagging doubt about the rising power of Persia led him to seek the ultimate authority, the Oracle at Delphi. He sent lavish gifts of pure gold to the sanctuary, hoping to secure a favorable prediction. His question was simple and direct: should he march against the Persian Empire? The answer from the Pythia, the priestess of Apollo, was anything but simple. She declared that if Croesus crossed the river Halys to attack, a great empire would indeed be destroyed. Hearing this, the king was overjoyed, convinced the oracle meant his enemy's downfall. He mobilized his armies and crossed the river, confident of victory. The ensuing war, however, was a disaster. The Persian king Cyrus the Great routed the Lydian forces, captured Croesus, and absorbed his entire kingdom into the growing Persian Empire. The great empire that fell was not Persia, it was his own. The prophecy had been perfectly, tragically ambiguous. To understand how such a powerful king could be so deceived, we must look at the source itself. The Oracle at Delphi was not just a temple, it was the spiritual heart of the ancient world. Perched on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, it was a place where the veil between the human and the divine was believed to be thin. The Pythia, the woman who served as the oracle's voice, was no ordinary priestess. Before delivering her prophecies, she would descend into a sacred chamber, sit on a tripod stool, and breathe in intoxicating vapors said to rise from a fissure in the earth. In this altered state, she would channel the god Apollo, her often cryptic utterances then interpreted and written down by attending priests. The historian Herodotus documented the entire affair of Croesus in great detail, showcasing the oracle's immense political power. Rulers from every corner of the Greek world, from Athens to Sparta, would not make a major decision without first consulting the Pythia. They knew her words could crown kings or topple them, start wars or end them. The fall of Croesus cemented the oracle's reputation not as a mere soothsayer, but as a divine instrument of fate. It was a stark lesson that the gods spoke in riddles, and that the most dangerous interpretation of a prophecy is the one you most want to hear. While Croesus learned the dangers of misinterpretation, Rome built an empire by attempting to codify the divine word. Its survival often hinged upon a collection of texts so powerful they were guarded like the city's own soul, the legendary Sibylline Books. Their origin story is one of the most dramatic in all of ancient history. In the reign of its final king, the arrogant Tarquinius Superbus, a mysterious old woman arrived at his court. She was the Cumaean Sibyl, a prophetess who channeled the will of the gods. She offered the king 9 books containing prophecies that foretold the entire future of Rome. Her price was exorbitant. Tarquinius, scoffing at the seemingly crazy old woman, refused. The Sibyl did not plead. She simply walked away, burned 3 of the 9 books in a nearby fire, and returned. She offered the remaining 6 books for the exact same price. The king, now amused by her audacity, refused once more. Again, the Sibyl left, burned 3 more books, and came back with the final 3. She demanded the original price for this last, diminished set. This time, the king was unnerved. His advisors urged him to see the hand of the gods in this strange persistence. A sense of dread fell over him. What dire knowledge had he just allowed to be destroyed? He paid the full original sum, acquiring a mere third of the original wisdom at triple the cost. These 3 surviving books were immediately entrusted to a special priesthood and housed in the temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill. They were not to be read casually. Their power was reserved for moments of existential crisis, when portents darkened the sky, when plague ravaged the population, or when foreign armies threatened the gates. The Roman Senate would order the priests to consult the sacred text. The priests would search for a specific ritual or a course of action, a prayer to a forgotten god, the introduction of a new deity, a specific public ceremony that would appease the heavens and save the Republic. One of the most famous consultations occurred during the Second Punic War, when the brilliant Carthaginian general Hannibal brought Rome to the brink of annihilation. After his devastating victory at the Battle of Cannae, the city was gripped with terror and despair. The Senate, desperate for any hope, turned to the Sibylline Books. The prophecies within prescribed a truly extreme measure, the introduction of the Phrygian goddess Cybele, the Great Mother, to Rome. A sacred black stone representing the goddess was brought with great ceremony from Asia Minor to the city. This act of religious diplomacy was meant to secure divine favor, and while the war dragged on for years, Rome ultimately prevailed. The books were consulted for centuries, a spiritual compass for an empire in its most vulnerable moments. But the original books, the very ones purchased by Tarquinius, were lost forever when the Temple of Jupiter burned in a great fire. Later collections were assembled, but they too were destroyed, the last by a Roman general fearing their power would be used against him. The true contents of those first 3 books, the surviving fragments of a much grander vision, remain one of history's greatest enigmas. What future did they foresee that we can never know? What other crises did they guide Rome through? Their wisdom now turned to ash. The story makes you wonder about the price of ignoring a warning and the profound cost of the knowledge we have allowed to slip through our fingers. Far from the political machinations of Rome, in the serene foothills of the Himalayas, another king received a prophecy that would set a profoundly different destiny into motion. For King Suddhodana, ruler of the Shakya clan, the birth of his son Siddhartha was a moment of immense joy, yet it was quickly shadowed by a divine prediction. A renowned sage named Asita, drawn to the palace by celestial signs, came to see the newborn prince. After examining the child with great care, the holy man began to weep. He foresaw with absolute clarity that this boy possessed the 32 marks of a great man, signs that pointed to one of 2 inevitable futures. Siddhartha would grow up to become either a Chakravartin, a universal monarch who would rule the entire world, or he would renounce his throne to become a fully enlightened Buddha, a spiritual teacher for all of humanity. Asita wept not for the child but for himself, knowing he would not live long enough to hear the profound teachings this boy would one day reveal. This prophecy placed a heavy burden on the king's heart. Terrified by the thought of his son abandoning his royal duties and the comforts of the palace for a life of ascetic hardship, Suddhodana devised a plan. He resolved to engineer the boy's future, to create an environment so perfect, so insulated from any form of suffering, that the prince would have no reason to seek answers beyond his gilded walls. The king surrounded Siddhartha with every imaginable luxury and pleasure. He built 3 separate palaces for each season, filled with beautiful attendants and entertainers. The young prince was given only the finest clothes, the most exquisite food, and was carefully shielded from the sight of old age, sickness, or death. Every potential trigger for spiritual questioning was systematically removed, all in a desperate attempt to steer him toward the path of the powerful worldly king and away from that of the enlightened sage. This deliberate shaping of Siddhartha's reality, this beautiful cage constructed out of a father's fear, makes the next part of the story so powerful. For the prophecy was not a simple prediction, it was a statement of potential that set up the central conflict of the Buddha's early life. The king's very efforts to prevent the spiritual path created the conditions for its ultimate inevitability. The sheltered perfection of the palace made the eventual confrontation with the real world outside its gates all the more shocking and transformative. This legend is not just a story about a prediction, it is a deep exploration of the human struggle between worldly destiny and a higher calling. It asks a timeless question: can we ever truly outmaneuver a fate that is written not in the stars but in the very nature of a person's soul? The king's elaborate plan was a wall built against the ocean, and soon the tide would begin to rise. The king's gilded cage could not hold back the truth forever, just as no earthly power can truly silence a prophecy. Centuries later and worlds away on a blasted Scottish heath, another fateful prediction would whisper not of enlightenment but of damnation. The three witches, the Weird Sisters, are some of the most iconic prophets in all of literature, their chilling meeting with the generals Macbeth and Banquo forever binding the idea of prophecy to the poison of ambition. They emerge from fog and thunder, these haggard women who speak with the authority of the unnatural. Their greetings to Macbeth are simple yet earth-shattering. They name him Thane of Glamis, which he is, then Thane of Cawdor, which he is not, and finally King hereafter. Before the men can even process this, they turn to Banquo and deliver a prophecy that seems almost an afterthought, yet holds the true key to the future. They tell him that he will be lesser than Macbeth, yet greater, not so happy, yet much happier, and most crucially, that he himself will not be king, but that kings will come from his line. The divine, or perhaps demonic, nature of their words is proven almost instantly. News arrives that the king has indeed named Macbeth the new Thane of Cawdor, making the first part of the prophecy a reality. This confirmation is the spark that ignites the tinder of Macbeth's hidden ambition. The prediction is not a command, it is a temptation. It plants a seed in his mind, the idea that if one part is true, the rest is not just possible but his by right. The prophecy acts as a catalyst, accelerating a moral collapse that might have otherwise remained dormant. It gives him a target for his desires and a justification for the unthinkable. If fate has declared him king, then surely any action he takes to claim that crown is merely him fulfilling his destiny. This is the terrifying paradox at the heart of the story. Does the prophecy foretell an inevitable future, or does it simply create the future by whispering it into existence? Macbeth chooses to believe in its inevitability, using it as an excuse to murder his king, his friend Banquo, and any other soul who stands in his way. His descent into tyranny and paranoia is not a deviation from the prophecy, but a direct consequence of his interpretation of it. He becomes the king, just as the sisters said he would, but the crown brings him only isolation, madness, and a blood-soaked reign. Meanwhile, Banquo represents the other path. He hears the same tantalizing promise that his children will wear crowns, yet he does not act upon it. He expresses suspicion, telling Macbeth that often, to win us to our harm, the instruments of darkness tell us truths to betray us in deepest consequence. He chooses to let fate unfold without his bloody intervention, a stark contrast to Macbeth's frantic and murderous efforts to seize his. The play becomes a brutal experiment in free will versus fate. It suggests that a prophecy is not a script to be followed, but a test of character. The real power was never in the witch's words, but in how the two men chose to hear them. This fictional legend, drawn from Scottish history by Shakespeare, has embedded itself so deeply into Western culture that we feel its chill even today. We speak of a Macbeth-like ambition, we reference the cursed play in hushed tones, and we understand that some promises, when spoken in the wrong ear, can unravel a soul completely. What makes this prophecy so enduringly powerful is its terrifying ambiguity. Were the sisters showing Macbeth a fixed future, or were they merely offering him a possibility, one he was all too eager to make real with his own hands? The witch's words twisted fate through human ambition, but sometimes a prophecy needs no human hand at all to be misunderstood. A calendar can suffice. As the world approached December 21st, 2012, a global anxiety took hold, all centered on an ancient Mesoamerican cycle known as the Maya long count. The popular narrative was simple and terrifying. The Maya had prophesied the end of the world. This modern legend, however, was a colossal case of mistranslation, a fusion of ancient wisdom and modern fear. The truth is far more profound than the myth. The Maya did not believe in a linear, apocalyptic end of time. Theirs was a worldview built on immense, repeating cycles, much like the steady turning of a great cosmic wheel. The date in question simply marked the completion of one of these grand cycles, a period of 5,125 years known as a Bacton. For the Maya, the end of a Bacton was not a final curtain call, but a moment of tremendous potential, a time of renewal and transformation. It was the cosmic equivalent of a year ending and a new one beginning, a reset that held the promise of rebirth and the rebalancing of the world. So where did the idea of global destruction come from? The doomsday myth was born not in the jungles of Central America, but in the West. It was fueled by a combination of mistranslated Maya texts, sensationalist books, and blockbuster films that repackaged a complex philosophical concept into a simple, marketable catastrophe. One key source was a damaged stone inscription from the ancient site of Tortuguero, which mentioned a deity associated with that date. Some interpretations, focusing on the fragmented and ambiguous parts of the text, suggested it hinted at a descent or a manifestation, but never a literal end. This vague reference was then ripped from its context and amplified into a definitive prediction of doom. The real celestial event of that period was also misunderstood. There was an astronomical alignment as the winter solstice sun appeared to cross the plane of our Milky Way galaxy. This is a slow, gradual process that takes centuries, not something that happens in a single day. The Maya were brilliant astronomers who would have noted this grand celestial backdrop, but they saw it as part of the great cosmic rhythm, not a trigger for annihilation. The lasting impact of the 2012 phenomenon is a fascinating chapter in itself. It revealed a deep, almost primal need in the modern world for grand narratives and definitive endpoints. It showed how easily ancient wisdom can be distorted to fit contemporary anxieties. And in the end, when the sun rose on December 22nd, the prophecy did come true in an unexpected way. The world was renewed not through fire and destruction, but through a collective sigh of relief and a valuable lesson in cultural humility. We were reminded that sometimes the most dangerous prophecies are the ones we write for ourselves. This raises a haunting question: how many other ancient truths are we currently misreading, shaping our fears around a future that was never really foretold? From the cosmic calendar of the Maya, we travel to the misty, enchanted forests of medieval Britain, where the very landscape seemed to whisper of destiny. Here, no figure looms larger than the great wizard Merlin, a prophet whose words were said to have shaped the fate of a nation. His origins are as mysterious as his powers, a fusion of Welsh folklore and the vivid imagination of a 12th century cleric, Geoffrey of Monmouth. In Geoffrey's history, Merlin is not merely a wise old man with a long beard. He is a figure born on the very border between the human and the supernatural. His mother was a virtuous mortal woman, but his father was an incubus, a malevolent spirit from a realm beyond our own. This demonic heritage granted Merlin his profound otherworldly knowledge, the ability to see past, present, and future all at once, while his human side allowed him to walk among kings and communicate his terrifying visions. One of his most enduring prophecies was a dramatic spectacle performed for the British King Vortigern. The king was trying to build a fortress, but its walls kept mysteriously collapsing each night. Merlin, then just a boy known as Ambrosius, was brought as a potential sacrifice to appease the land. Instead of fearing for his life, he revealed the true reason for the failure. Beneath the hill, he explained, was a hidden pool containing two great dragons, one red and one white. When the pool was drained, the dragons emerged and began a ferocious battle. Merlin interpreted this stunning vision as a prophecy of the struggle for Britain itself. The red dragon symbolized the native Britons, while the white dragon represented the invading Saxons. He foretold that the red dragon would eventually prevail, a prediction later used to bolster Welsh and British nationalism for centuries, a powerful piece of political propaganda that gave a divine mandate to a people's resistance. But Merlin's most famous legacy is, of course, his deep connection to the rise and fall of King Arthur. It was Merlin who orchestrated Arthur's very conception, using his magic to help other Pendragon assume the form of another man to be with Igraine, the woman he loved. From that moment on, the wizard was the guiding hand behind the throne, the architect of the king's destiny. He foresaw Arthur's glorious reign, the creation of the Round Table, and the quest for the Holy Grail. Yet, with the clarity that only a true seer possesses, he also foresaw the kingdom's tragic end, the betrayal by Mordred, and the terrible battle at Camlan that would bring the golden age of Camelot crashing down. Merlin embodies the ultimate archetype of the wise seer, a counselor who knows the future but is often powerless to change its darkest turns. His story makes us wonder, what is the greater burden, to be the king who lives the destiny, or the prophet who must watch it all unfold, knowing every glorious victory and every heartbreaking loss long before they come to pass? A king can be destroyed by a prophecy, but another can be built by one. For Alexander the Great, the word of a god was not a threat, it was a political and spiritual necessity. After conquering Egypt with startling ease, he bypassed its traditional capitals and marched his army into the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Libyan desert. His goal was a solitary oasis, a place so remote and sacred it was said even the great Persian king Cambyses had lost an entire army trying to reach it. This was the temple of Zeus Ammon at Siwa, home to an oracle whose authority rivaled that of Delphi itself. The journey was a calculated gamble against the elements. His small contingent, guided by talking ravens according to legend, or perhaps just by skilled Bedouin scouts, was battered by sandstorms and tormented by thirst. At one point, a sudden, unseasonal rainstorm saved them from dehydration, an event his followers saw as a divine favor, a sign that the gods themselves were guiding their commander. When they finally stumbled into the lush, palm-filled oasis, it must have seemed like a miracle. Alexander did not come as a supplicant, but as a man seeking confirmation of his own divine origin. He entered the inner sanctum of the temple alone for a private audience with the high priest. No one else heard the conversation that took place. When Alexander emerged, his face was alight with triumph. He declared to his men that the oracle had confirmed what he had long believed, that he was indeed the son of Zeus Ammon. The priest, it was said, had greeted him not as a mortal but as Paidion, a word meaning son of the god. This was the confirmation he craved. In that single, private moment, Alexander transformed his narrative. He was no longer just a brilliant Macedonian general, he was a living god-king, his authority flowing directly from the divine. He immediately used this prophecy to legitimize his rule over Egypt, having himself depicted in traditional Egyptian style with the ram's horns of Ammon, a symbol of divinity. This was not mere vanity, it was a masterstroke of political propaganda. By embracing the local god, he won the loyalty of the Egyptian priesthood and people, securing his rear as he turned to continue his world-altering conquests eastward. The prophecy from Siwa became the bedrock of his invincible persona, a story he and his followers told to explain his seemingly impossible successes. It fueled the belief that he was not just a man but a force of destiny, protected and favored by the king of the gods. His entire legacy, the empire that stretched from Greece to India, was built upon this foundational belief in his own divine nature, a belief cemented in the shifting sands of a distant oasis. What is most fascinating is that we will never know what the priest truly said. Alexander controlled the narrative completely. The prophecy's real power lay not in its words, but in Alexander's brilliant understanding of how to wield them. It makes you wonder, did the oracle create a god, or did a king simply use the oracle to create himself? Alexander harnessed a prophecy to forge a god-king, but across the Mediterranean, an entire nation's identity was shaped by prophetic promises of a very different kind of king. The Hebrew prophets did not speak from misty caves or incense-filled temples, but delivered their messages directly to the people and their rulers, weaving a complex tapestry of hope and warning that would resonate for millennia. These were not vague predictions, but often startlingly specific visions of a future deliverer, a Messiah, which means the Anointed One. The prophet Isaiah, speaking during a time of great political turmoil, painted a dual portrait of this promised figure that would create a profound tension in Jewish thought. In one sweeping vision, he foretold the birth of a child who would carry the most majestic of titles: Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. He described a king who would reign on the throne of David with justice and righteousness forever, establishing an eternal kingdom of peace where even the wolf would lie down with the lamb. This was the king many longed for, a powerful political and military leader who would shatter the oppressor's yoke and restore the nation's glory. Yet in another profound passage, Isaiah described a figure of a completely different nature, a suffering servant. This servant would be despised and rejected, a man of sorrows acquainted with grief. He would be wounded for the transgressions of others, and by his stripes humanity would be healed. He would be led like a lamb to the slaughter, silently bearing the sins of many. This was a shocking and counterintuitive messianic vision, a savior who would achieve victory not through conquest but through sacrifice and submission. How could these two portraits, the conquering king and the suffering servant, possibly be the same person? This paradox became a central puzzle for generations of scholars and believers. The prophet Micah added another crucial piece to the puzzle, one of breathtaking specificity. While other prophets spoke of grand themes, Micah named the place. He declared that from the seemingly insignificant village of Bethlehem, too small to be among the clans of Judah, would come a ruler over Israel whose origins were from of old, from ancient days. This was not a grand capital city, but a humble town known for shepherds, yet it was the prophesied birthplace of the destined king from the line of David. These prophecies, collected in the Hebrew Bible, created a fervent and palpable expectation in ancient Judea. For centuries, through exile and foreign occupation, the Jewish people held onto these words. They were a lifeline, a divine promise that their suffering was not the end of the story, that a deliverer was coming. This was not a passive hope, but an active watching and waiting, especially during the oppressive Roman rule when the desire for a Messiah who would drive out the invaders was at its peak. This expectation forms the direct backdrop for the events recounted in the New Testament. The authors of the Gospels presented the life of Jesus of Nazareth as the precise fulfillment of these ancient prophecies. They pointed to his birth in Bethlehem, his lineage from King David, his teachings of peace, and most powerfully, his crucifixion and death as the ultimate embodiment of Isaiah's suffering servant. For Christian theology, this was the key that unlocked the prophetic paradox, the belief that the Messiah was both the divine king and the sacrificial lamb, fulfilling both strands of the prophecy in one person and one mission. The interpretation of these ancient Hebrew prophecies created a theological bridge between two world religions, a bridge built on a shared text but a diverging understanding of the promised one. It forces us to consider the immense power of a single idea, a single hope for a deliverer, and how the longing for its fulfillment can ripple through centuries and fundamentally reshape the spiritual landscape of the world. The most famous prophecy from Delphi was not a prediction at all, but a command carved into the very stone of the temple forecourt, a stark invitation to every seeker who approached the oracle, "Know thyself." These two words, "Know thyself," formed the bedrock of the entire Delphic experience. Before any king or commoner could ask the Pythia about their future, they were confronted with this profound instruction to first look inward. This was the oracle's ultimate wisdom, a piece of prophetic guidance not for foreseeing events, but for shaping the character of the one who would live through them. It was a divine warning against the hubris that had destroyed kings like Croesus, a constant reminder that you are human, not a god, and that true power begins with understanding your own nature, your limits, and your place in the world. This maxim found its greatest champion in the philosopher Socrates, who made it the central pillar of his life's work. He believed that the unexamined life was not worth living, and he roamed the Athenian marketplace not to provide answers, but to ask relentless questions that exposed how little people truly knew about themselves, their values, and their own motivations. For Socrates, to know thyself was to embark on a lifelong journey of intellectual and moral inquiry, to confront your own ignorance as the first step toward genuine wisdom. This Delphic principle echoes far beyond the ancient world, resonating at the very heart of modern psychology. The entire practice of therapy and self-analysis is a contemporary expression of this ancient command, a structured pursuit to understand our own minds, our hidden drives, and the patterns that dictate our lives. It is prophetic wisdom because it speaks to a truth that is always relevant, always waiting to be rediscovered. The command does not promise an easy path. To truly know yourself is to confront both your capacity for greatness and your potential for darkness, to acknowledge the flaws and strengths that define your humanity. This piece of stone inscribed wisdom has guided emperors and artists, scientists and spiritual seekers for 2,500 years. Its power lies in its timeless simplicity, a prophetic voice from the past that continues to ask the most urgent of questions: who are you really, before you ask for anything else? The command to know thyself is a quiet, internal wisdom, but some prophecies are written in thunder and carved in ice. From the sun-drenched temples of Greece, we journey north to the land of fjords and longboats, where the air itself seems to crackle with impending doom. In the Old Norse poem known as the Völuspá, the prophecy of the seeress, a Völva or seeress, channels a vision of such cosmic scale it spans from the world's first breath to its last. She speaks of Yggdrasil, the great world tree, and the 9 realms it supports, but her voice grows heavy as she reveals the inescapable climax of all things, Ragnarök, the twilight of the gods. This is not a quiet end. It begins with Fimbulwinter, 3 winters back-to-back with no summer in between, a perpetual blizzard that engulfs the earth in cold and darkness. The bonds of kinship and law shatter, brother turning against brother in a desperate struggle for survival. Then, the chains that held the monstrous forces at bay begin to break. Loki, the trickster god, breaks free from his torment. His terrifying son, the great wolf Fenrir, shakes off his magical fetter, his jaws gaping wide enough to touch the earth and the heavens. The world serpent Jormungandr rises from the ocean depths, spewing venom across the land and sea. From the fiery realm of Muspelheim, the fire giant Surtur marches with a flaming sword that outshines the sun itself. The gods, knowing their fate is sealed, arm themselves for the final battle. Odin, the All-Father, rides to the field to confront the wolf Fenrir, a battle he knows he will lose. Thor, the thunder god, faces his ancient nemesis, the world serpent. He slays the beast but staggers only 9 steps before succumbing to its venom. One by one, the shining figures of Asgard fall. Heimdall, the watchman, and Loki, the betrayer, kill each other. The stars vanish from the sky, the earth sinks into the boiling sea, and a profound darkness swallows everything. Yet the seeress does not end her prophecy there. For the Norse, this cataclysm was not a final, meaningless conclusion. After the fire and the flood subside, a new world emerges from the water, green, fertile, and peaceful. A new sun, the daughter of the old one, warms the land. A few gods survive, including Odin's son Vidar and Thor's sons. They find the golden game, pieces the gods once played with, symbols of a lost golden age. Two human survivors, hidden deep within the world tree, repopulate the earth. This cyclical vision of destruction and rebirth gave the prophecy its profound power. It shaped the entire Viking ethos. Why be courageous? Why strive for honor and glory in a life that is short and brutal? Because the end is already written. The true measure of a person or a god was not whether they avoided their fate, but how they faced it. To go to a battle you know you will lose, to fight with every ounce of your strength until the very last breath, that was the ultimate expression of heroism. The prophecy of Ragnarök was not a source of despair, but a call to live with defiant courage, to meet an inevitable end with a sword in your hand and your head held high. It makes you wonder, in our own lives, what battles would we fight with more valor if we were not afraid of how they might end? A cycle of destruction and rebirth echoes across mythologies, and in the rich tapestry of Hindu tradition, this cosmic rhythm finds its ultimate expression in the prophecy of the 10th avatar. The great preserver god Vishnu is believed to descend to earth in various forms or avatars whenever the cosmic balance is threatened. We have seen the boar that raised the earth from the cosmic ocean, the half-lion that tore apart a demon king, and the revered Prince Rama. Yet the final incarnation, the one that remains in the future, is Kalki, the warrior who brings not preservation but necessary, purifying destruction. Ancient texts like the Puranas describe our current era as the Kali Yuga, the age of darkness and conflict. It is a time when virtue and moral order, known as Dharma, have decayed to a mere shadow. The world is choked with adharma, a term for unrighteousness where falsehood masquerades as truth and greed overpowers compassion. It is at this absolute nadir, when hope seems all but extinguished, that the prophecy declares Vishnu will take his final form. He will appear as Kalki, a divine warrior born into a humble village. He is depicted as a majestic figure astride a white horse named Devadatta, which means God-given, and in his hand he carries a blazing sword that shines like a comet. This is not a quiet savior offering gentle teachings. Kalki is the embodiment of divine wrath and righteous judgment, a cosmic reset button given form. His mission is to ride across the corrupted earth, his sword cutting down the wicked and the oppressive, those who have led the world into its state of spiritual filth. He will dismantle the structures of adharma, purging the world of its moral poison in a great and terrible cleansing. This apocalyptic vision, however, is not an end in itself. The destruction of the old, dark age is the essential prelude to a glorious rebirth. After Kalki's work is complete, the wheel of time turns once more. The Kali Yuga crumbles away, and from its ashes a new golden age dawns, the Satya Yuga. This is an era of truth and perfect dharma, where humanity lives in harmony with the cosmos, free from deceit, sorrow, and suffering. The prophecy of Kalki is therefore a profound articulation of hope rooted in a cyclical view of time. Time in Hinduism is not a linear march toward a single conclusion, but an endless cycle of ages, a great in-breath and out-breath of the universe itself. The darkness of the Kali Yuga is not permanent, it is merely a phase in this eternal rhythm. The prophecy assures us that no matter how deep the darkness falls, the dawn is always destined to follow. It asks a challenging question of every generation. Are we living in the age that calls for the white horse and the blazing sword? and what part do we play in upholding the Dharma that Kalki will one day come to restore? While the prophecy of Kalki speaks of a divine warrior cleansing the world, another ancient tradition offers a gentler, more personal form of foresight, one that finds wisdom not in a final battle, but in the subtle patterns of change itself. In China, for over 3,000 years, the I Ching, or the Book of Changes, has served not as a single prediction, but as a timeless system for obtaining prophetic guidance. Its legendary origins trace back to the mythical sage King Fu Zai, who is said to have first perceived the 8 fundamental trigrams, the building blocks of the entire system, by contemplating the patterns on a tortoise shell. These 8 trigrams, symbols representing heaven, earth, thunder, water, mountain, wind, fire, and lake, were later doubled and expanded into the 64 hexagrams that form the core of the I Ching by King Wen of Zhou while he was imprisoned by a tyrannical emperor. Each of these 64 hexagrams is a unique 6-line figure, and each line carries its own nuanced meaning. To consult the oracle, a person does not simply read the book, they perform a ritual. They might cast 50 yarrow stalks in a complex meditative process, or more commonly today, toss 3 coins 6 times. The fall of the coins, whether heads or tails, generates a specific hexagram. This hexagram is not a simple yes or no answer. It is a multi-layered snapshot of the cosmic moment, a philosophical mirror reflecting the dynamic interplay of forces in your life and in the universe. The text for that hexagram, and for any changing lines within it, offers poetic, often enigmatic commentary on the situation. It might speak of the joy of lake waters gathering, the difficulty of a mountain obstructing the path, or the danger of a dragon flying too high. The I Ching's power lies in its philosophy. It is founded on the principle that the only constant in life is change, and that all change follows predictable, natural patterns. By aligning yourself with this cosmic flow, you can navigate life's complexities with greater wisdom and grace. For millennia, emperors used it to decide matters of state, generals consulted it before battle, and individuals sought its counsel for personal dilemmas about relationships, careers, and spiritual growth. It blends deep cosmology with practical prophecy, offering not a fixed destiny to be feared, but a map of potentialities to be understood. It asks you to engage with its wisdom, to interpret its symbols in the context of your own life, making you an active participant in co-creating your future. This raises a profound question about the nature of prophecy itself. Is the future a fixed path we are trying to foresee, or is it a river of possibilities, and the true prophecy is the wisdom to navigate its currents? The cryptic quatrains of Nostradamus have whispered from the pages of history for nearly 500 years, a perpetual puzzle box of potential futures. Michel de Nostradame was not a king or a priest, but a 16th-century French apothecary who turned to the shadows of prophecy, compiling his visions into a book titled Les Prophéties. This volume contained hundreds of 4-line poems known as quatrains, each one a dense fog of archaic French anagrams and symbolic language deliberately crafted to be obscure. He claimed his methods involved long nights of scrying, gazing into a bowl of water set upon a brass tripod to receive his flashes of the future, a practice that placed him in constant danger from the religious authorities of his time. It is this very ambiguity that has granted his work such a long and contentious life. One of his most cited quatrain is often interpreted as predicting the Great Fire of London in 1666. It speaks of the blood of the just being demanded of London, burnt by fire in 3 times 20 plus 6. Another verse mentions a child born of a poor family who would seduce a great nation with his oratory, a description many later applied to the rise of Adolf Hitler. Most chillingly for the modern era, a quatrain referencing 2 steel birds and the city of the new land where the great towers fall has been fervently and controversially linked to the attacks of September 11th. The enduring power of Nostradamus lies not in any single proven prediction, but in the relentless human drive to find pattern and meaning in his riddles. His words are a mirror reflecting back the fears and preoccupations of whatever age is reading them. For every believer who sees uncanny accuracy, a skeptic points out that his quatrains are so vague they can be retrofitted to countless historical events. Was he a true seer who encoded his visions to protect himself, or simply a brilliant wordsmith who understood the art of the tantalizing, unfalsifiable claim? The controversy itself is the prophecy's greatest legacy, fueling an endless industry of books and documentaries that seek to finally crack his code, proving that the most powerful prediction of all is the timeless desire to believe that someone, somewhere, saw what was coming. The cryptic verses of Nostradamus were designed for endless interpretation, but another prophecy was forged in the white-hot fury of a people pushed to the brink. In the damp, misty forests of 1st century Britain, the Celtic Druids served as the spiritual and political heart of their tribes. They were far more than priests, they were the judges, the historians, and most importantly for our story, the prophets. They were the keepers of the old ways, and they watched with growing dread as the Roman legions methodically tightened their grip on the land. When the Romans publicly flogged Queen Boudica of the Iceni tribe and violated her daughters, they ignited more than a personal vendetta. They lit the fuse of a divinely sanctioned war. The Druids, reading the signs in the flight of birds and the entrails of sacrifices, proclaimed a powerful prophecy. They foretold that Boudica and the Iceni would be victorious, that they would drive the hated Romans from British shores forever. This was not a vague hope, it was a divine promise, a celestial mandate for rebellion. The prophecy became the spiritual engine of the revolt, transforming Boudica's personal rage into a sacred crusade. Emboldened by this guarantee of victory, a massive coalition of tribes rallied to her banner. The rebellion was swift and terrifyingly effective. Boudica's warriors swept down upon the Roman settlements like a force of nature. They utterly destroyed Camulogenum, a veterans' colony and a symbol of Roman authority, reducing its temple to smoldering rubble. They then turned their fury toward Londinium, a bustling commercial hub. The Roman governor Suetonius abandoned the city to its fate, and Boudica's army razed it to the ground, leaving a layer of black ash that remains a grim archaeological testament to the violence. Verulamium, a town loyal to Rome, met the same fiery end. Tens of thousands were said to have been slaughtered, a brutal message to the invaders that the prophecy of liberation was being fulfilled. Yet the gods can be fickle, and divine promises are sometimes broken on the hard reality of the battlefield. The Roman governor, a seasoned commander, chose his ground carefully. He lured Boudica's vast but undisciplined force into a narrow gorge where their numbers became a disadvantage. The Romans, with their superior armor, discipline, and tactical formation, formed a wall of shields and javelins. They systematically annihilated the British army. Rather than be captured, Boudica is said to have taken poison, a final, defiant act. In the aftermath, the Roman historians, particularly Tacitus, used the Druidic prophecy to serve their own narrative. The rebellion's failure was not just a military defeat, they argued, but a divine judgment. The prophecy itself was recast as a tragic deception, a foolish superstition that had led the Britons to their doom against the unstoppable, destined power of Rome. The prophecy of Boudica's victory became a cautionary tale about the dangers of believing your own divine press, a stark reminder that a prophecy can grant the courage to challenge an empire, but it cannot always grant the strength to bring it down. A prophecy of deliverance burns just as brightly within Islamic tradition, a promise that before the final hour, a figure of perfect justice will emerge to heal a broken world. This is the prophecy of the Mahdi, the guided one. Across the diverse tapestry of the Muslim world, the belief is shared that in the end times, when the earth is filled with oppression and corruption, God will send a man from the family of the Prophet Muhammad. His name will be Muhammad, his father's name will be Abdullah, and he will fill the world with equity and justice, just as it had been filled with tyranny and injustice. He is not a divine figure, but a supremely righteous human ruler, a restorer of divine law. The Hadith, the collected sayings and traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, paint a vivid picture of his reign. He will rule for a specific number of years, often said to be 7 or 9, a golden age where security and abundance are so complete that a woman will be able to travel alone from one city to another without any fear. His most significant act will be to lead the global Muslim community in prayer in Jerusalem, and at that prayer he will be joined by another pivotal eschatological figure, Jesus, the son of Mary. In Islamic belief, Jesus will return to earth not as a Messiah for a new religion, but as a Muslim ruler who confirms the message of Muhammad. He will break the cross, symbolizing the end of a specific form of Christian belief, and he will kill the false Messiah, the Dajjal, who represents the ultimate deception. Together, the Mahdi and Jesus will establish a worldwide peace, a universal caliphate of justice that stands until the day of judgment itself. While this core narrative provides a powerful source of hope, the understanding of the Mahdi's identity diverges significantly between Sunni and Shia Islam. In Sunni tradition, the Mahdi is a future figure who has not yet been born. He is awaited as a righteous ruler who will appear when God decrees, a beacon of hope in a darkening age. For Shia Muslims, however, the prophecy is far more specific and immediate. They believe the Mahdi is not a future figure, but a historical one, Muhammad al-Mahdi, the 12th and final Imam. According to Shia belief, this Imam was hidden by God in the 9th century to protect him from his enemies. He exists in a state known as occultation, a supernatural concealment from the physical world, but he remains the true leader of the faithful, guiding them spiritually. His return, his reappearance, is the central event Shia eschatology awaits. This profound belief has fueled political and spiritual movements for centuries. Throughout Islamic history, countless leaders have arisen claiming to be the Mahdi, rallying followers with the promise of divine justice and the overthrow of corrupt rulers. In the modern era, this prophecy continues to resonate deeply, offering a theological framework for resistance against oppression and a potent vision of a future where faith and justice finally triumph over a world mired in conflict. It is a prophecy that answers a timeless human cry, the cry for a leader who will not just rule, but who will truly set things right. While the Mahdi offers a promise of future justice, another prophecy reaches back into the deepest past to anchor a kingdom's very identity in the divine. The Kebra Nagast, the Glory of Kings, is Ethiopia's sacred epic, a sprawling narrative that weaves history, legend, and prophecy into a single, unshakable truth. At its heart is the story of a royal union that would shape a nation's destiny for 3,000 years, the meeting between the legendary Queen of Sheba and the wise King Solomon of Jerusalem. Drawn by Solomon's fame, the queen, known as Macbeth in Ethiopian tradition, traveled to his court. She was overwhelmed by his wisdom and the grandeur of his God, and Solomon, equally taken with her, ensured she stayed long enough to be swayed. Before she returned to her own kingdom, they conceived a son. That son, Menelik I, would become the foundational figure of a prophecy of lineage. The Kebra Nagast details how Menelik, as a young man, traveled to Jerusalem to meet his father. Solomon received him with great honor and wanted him to stay and rule after him. But Menelik felt a call to return to his mother's land, and a profound event transpired that would forever alter the spiritual geography of the world. The firstborn sons of the Israelite nobles who accompanied Menelik, fearing they would lose their connection to God so far from Jerusalem, secretly took the ultimate prize from the temple's Holy of Holies. They brought the Ark of the Covenant itself to Ethiopia. This was not a theft in the eyes of the legend, but a divine transfer of covenant. God's favor had moved from Jerusalem to the new Zion, Axum. The prophecy embedded in this epic was clear and powerful. The Ethiopian monarchs were not merely earthly rulers, they were the direct blood descendants of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. This Solomonic dynasty was therefore a divinely ordained institution, its legitimacy prophesied and sealed by the presence of the Ark within its borders. For centuries, every emperor of Ethiopia traced their lineage back to Menelik I, right up to the last reigning monarch, Haile Selassie, who ruled in the 20th century. His coronation in 1930 was seen by many Ethiopians as the continuation of this unbroken sacred line. This ancient prophecy found a powerful new interpretation far beyond Ethiopia's borders. In Jamaica, a spiritual movement was reading the same scriptures and legends. Rastafarians saw in Haile Selassie, whose pre-coronation name was Ras Tafari Makonnen, the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. They identified him as the returned Messiah, the Lion of Judah, the living God who would lead the African diaspora to freedom and redemption. They saw his claimed Solomonic descent not as mere political history, but as divine proof of his identity. Here, an ancient national prophecy born from the Kebra Nagast was reborn as a global spiritual truth. It raises a profound question about the life of a prophecy, how a story meant to legitimize kings could evolve into a cornerstone of faith for millions, proving that a legend's true power lies not in its origin, but in its endless capacity for renewal. A broken sacred hoop is a world out of balance. This was the heart of the prophecy given to a young Oglala Lakota boy named Black Elk, a vision so vast it would define his entire life and become a spiritual testament for his people. At the age of only 9 years old, while gravely ill, Black Elk experienced what he later called his great vision. He was carried by 2 spirit beings to a cloud world where he stood before the 6 grandfathers, the powerful spirits of the 4 directions plus the sky and the earth. They showed him a flowering tree at the center of a great hoop, a symbol of the Lakota nation living in harmony. He was given sacred gifts, a healing herb, the power of the cleansing wind, and a bow that would bring peace. But the vision was not only one of beauty. It also revealed a terrible storm coming from the east, a dark cloud filled with soldiers and the chaos of battle, a clear foreshadowing of the brutal wars and the cultural devastation that would soon engulf the Plains tribes. The grandfathers showed him that the sacred hoop would be broken and the flowering tree would wither. This was the prophecy of suffering, the unavoidable fate he saw for his people. Yet the vision did not end in despair. The final message was one of profound renewal. He saw the hoop mended and the tree blooming once more, not just for the Lakota but for all nations of the world. This was the hope he was meant to carry. Black Elk spent the rest of his long life trying to live up to this immense responsibility. He fought as a young man at the Battle of the Little Bighorn and was present at the horrific massacre at Wounded Knee. These events were, to him, the literal unfolding of the dark storm from his vision. In his later years, he recounted his entire life story to the poet John Neihardt, who published it as the book Black Elk Speaks. In its pages, we hear his most famous lament, a heartbroken cry that has echoed for generations. He said, and I paraphrase, "I did not know then how much was ended. The people's dream died there. It was a beautiful dream, and I, to whom so great a vision was given in my youth, you see me now a pitiful old man who has done nothing, for the nation's hoop is broken and scattered. There is no center any longer, and the sacred tree is dead." This profound sorrow was not a surrender, but a testament to the weight of the prophecy. He felt he had failed in his duty to save his people's way of life. Yet, in a powerful twist of fate, the very act of sharing his story became a part of the prophecy's fulfillment. The book itself became a sacred hoop for the world, a vessel carrying the message of unity and renewal far beyond his own time. Today, Black Elk Speaks is a foundational text of Native American spirituality, offering a searingly honest look at the impact of colonialism through the eyes of a holy man. His prophecy serves as a timeless warning about the cost of a broken world, and an enduring promise that the circle, no matter how shattered, can always be made whole again. His vision asks us a difficult question: what have we allowed to break in our own world, and what is our part in the sacred work of mending it? The same fire that burned in Boudicca's Britain also smoldered in the damp forests of Germania, where another prophetess wielded a power that could shake the foundations of Rome. High in a wooden tower, isolated from the everyday world, lived Velida of the Bructeri tribe. She was more than a wise woman, she was a living oracle, a channel for the gods whose voice could turn local grievances into a unified rebellion. No common man or even a chieftain could approach her directly. Instead, they would bring their questions and offerings to her male relatives, who would then ascend to her solitary chamber and return with the divine pronouncements. This ritual distance did not diminish her authority, it magnified it, wrapping her words in an aura of untouchable sanctity. When the Batavian chieftain Gaius Julius Civilis, a former ally of Rome, decided to rise up against his overlords, he knew his rebellion needed more than soldiers, it needed a divine mandate. He turned to Velida. The Roman historian Tacitus records that she prophesied a clear path to victory for the Germanic tribes, foretelling the defeat of the legions and the liberation of their lands. Her predictions became the spiritual fuel for the Batavian revolt, a bloody conflict that saw Civilis and his coalition win stunning early successes, even destroying 2 Roman legions. Velida's name was whispered from tribe to tribe, her prophecies binding them together with the promise that the gods themselves had ordained their triumph. For a time, it seemed she was truly shaping destiny, but the might of Rome was a tide that few could withstand forever. The rebellion was eventually crushed by a massive Roman force, and the legions made a point of capturing the prophetess who had inspired it all. Velida was taken alive, a prized trophy of war. Her capture was a deliberate political and spiritual act, a demonstration that Rome could not only defeat armies but could also cage the very voices of the gods that opposed it. Her fate was to be removed from her tower, from her people, and displayed as a symbol of Roman power subduing the wild, prophetic spirit of Germania. The story of Velida is a stark reminder that in the ancient world, a prophetess was not just a mystic, she was a political force of nature, whose tower could be as formidable as any fortress until the empire decided to tear it down. A world locked in eternal struggle between light and darkness awaits its final champion. This is the Zoroastrian prophecy of the Saoshyant, a messianic figure whose arrival will signal the ultimate victory of good over evil. Rooted in the ancient teachings of the prophet Zoroaster, this vision from Persia presents one of history's earliest and most influential blueprints for a world savior. The Saoshyant, whose name literally means one who brings benefit, is prophesied to be a direct descendant of Zoroaster himself, born in a miraculous manner from a virgin mother who bathes in a lake where the prophet's seed is preserved. He is not the first savior, but the last and greatest of 3 such figures who appear at the end of each cosmic age. His divine mission is nothing less than the total transformation of existence. He will lead the final, cataclysmic battle against Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit of evil, and his legion of demons. In this ultimate confrontation, the forces of falsehood and darkness will be utterly vanquished. But the Saoshyant's work does not end with a simple military victory. He will then perform his most wondrous act, the resurrection of all the dead. Every soul that has ever lived will be raised back to life, not as ethereal spirits, but in physical, youthful bodies to bear witness to the final judgment. This leads to the grand climax, the Frashokriti, a term meaning the making wonderful. In this final renovation, the entire universe will be purified by a river of molten metal. The righteous will pass through this river feeling only a warm, soothing bath, while the wicked will be cleansed of their final impurities in a searing instant of truth. The world itself will be restored to a state of perfection, forever free from death, decay, and the very concept of evil. The mountains will become like plains, and the earth will provide endless sustenance. This powerful eschatology, developed over 2,500 years ago, created a template that would profoundly shape the world to come. The clear dualism of a cosmic struggle between a supreme god of light and a personified force of evil, the concept of a final judgment day with a resurrection of the dead, and the arrival of a messianic savior born of a virgin, all of these Zoroastrian ideas flowed into the Jewish world during the Babylonian exile. They then filtered into the emerging theologies of Christianity and Islam, providing a foundational structure for their own end-time prophecies. The Saishient stands as a testament to a timeless human longing, the belief that no matter how deep the darkness, a promised Redeemer will one day arrive to set the world right for good. Deep within the heart of a mountain, an emperor with a fiery red beard sleeps at a stone table, waiting. Across the sea, a wounded king rests in a mist-shrouded isle, his legendary sword held in trust. The prophecy of the sleeping king is a powerful archetype that appears across cultures, a promise that a nation's greatest hero is not gone, but merely in repose, ready to awaken when hope seems lost. In Germany, the legend clings to Emperor Frederick I, known as Barbarossa. After leading the Holy Roman Empire for decades, his death during the Third Crusade in the late 12th century was so unthinkable to his people that they refused to accept it. Instead, a story took root that he was not dead, but slumbering in a hidden chamber beneath the Kifjusa mountain in Thuringia. He sits there still, it is said, his head nodding, his red beard grown so long it has coiled around the legs of the stone table. The omen of his return is as specific as it is eerie. Ravens are said to circle the mountain perpetually. When those ravens finally depart, it will be the signal that the emperor has awakened. He will rise, hang his shield on a dead tree that will burst into leaf, and lead Germany to its former glory in its darkest hour. Centuries later and across the English Channel, a strikingly similar myth surrounds King Arthur. Mortally wounded at the Battle of Camlan, he was not taken to a grave but to the mystical island of Avalon. The common belief, immortalized by writers like Sir Thomas Malory, is that he is healing there, that he is the once and future king. The prophecy declares he will return to lead Britain again, a messianic figure for a nation in peril. The omens for his return are woven into the land itself, tied to ancient sites and the enduring symbol of his power, Excalibur. The Sleeping King legend is far more than a simple fairy tale. It is a profound national coping mechanism, a psychological anchor for a people facing invasion, political fragmentation, or cultural decline. For the Germans of the many small states that followed the empire's decline, the story of Barbarossa was a promise of reunification and restored imperial power. For the British, enduring waves of Saxon, Viking, and Norman conquests, the hope of Arthur's return was a hope for the return of a native, righteous British rule, a restoration of a lost golden age of chivalry and justice. These prophecies transform history into myth, and myth into a source of enduring resilience. They answer a deep human need to believe that our greatest heroes are never truly gone, that they are simply waiting in the wings of history, ready to answer the call when the need is most desperate. This makes you wonder, who are the sleeping kings of our own time, the figures of legend we secretly hope are waiting just out of sight for the moment we need them most. A sleeping king waits for ravens to fly, but a wandering people searched for an eagle. For the Aztecs, a prophecy was not a prediction of what would be, but a set of divine instructions for what they must become. Their entire identity was forged during a long, arduous migration from a mythical northern homeland called Aztlan. Their patron god, the fierce sun and war deity Huitzilopochtli, spoke through his priests, guiding them ever southward with a powerful and enigmatic promise. He told them they would know they had reached their destined home, the place where they would build a great civilization when they witnessed a specific and startling omen. They were to find an eagle perched proudly on a cactus devouring a snake. This vision became their spiritual compass. For generations, they traveled through harsh deserts and fought hostile tribes, their faith tested at every turn. They were a people in search of a sign, carrying their God with them in a sacred bundle. When they finally arrived in the Valley of Mexico, they found a landscape dominated by a vast lake system and powerful city-states that viewed them as uncouth outsiders. For a time, they were forced to serve as mercenaries for these established kingdoms, living on the margins of a society they were destined to overshadow. Then the moment of fulfillment arrived. According to their codices, the priests led the people to a swampy, seemingly undesirable island in Lake Texcoco. There, on a small, rocky outcrop, they saw it. An eagle, its wings spread wide, stood upon a prickly pear cactus, a vibrant snake clutched in its talons. The prophecy was realized. This was not merely a place to settle, it was a divine mandate. The island was transformed through immense human effort into the magnificent capital of Tenochtitlan, a city of canals, towering temples, and floating gardens that would become the heart of a vast empire. The prophecy of the eagle and the serpent served as the ultimate justification for their rapid and brutal rise to power. It proved to them and to their subjects that their dominance was not just a matter of military might, but a preordained destiny, a contract with their God. The symbol endured long after the Spanish conquest razed Tenochtitlan to its foundations. Today, that very same eagle, serpent, and cactus are emblazoned at the center of the Mexican flag, a continuous thread connecting a modern nation to its ancient prophetic origins. The omen ensured their place in history, but it also makes us wonder how many other great cities were born not from a king's decree, but from a vision seen by a desperate people in a wilderness. Her voice was said to echo for 1,000 years, a whisper threading through the very foundation of Rome. While the Sibylline Books were guarded in the temple, their original seller, the Cumean Sibyl herself, was a legend of immense personal power and staggering longevity. She was believed to dwell in a cavern near the Greek colony of Cumae in Italy, a prophetess of Apollo who had asked the god for as many years of life as the grains of sand she held in her hand. She was granted this wish, but she forgot to ask for eternal youth. As the centuries piled upon her, she shriveled away, suspended in a jar, until only her haunting voice remained. Her most famous literary appearance comes not in a history book, but in an epic poem designed to be Rome's national myth. In Virgil's Aeneid, the Trojan hero Aeneas, destined to found the Roman people, seeks her out. She becomes his guide, leading him through the terrifying entrance to the underworld so he can speak with the ghost of his father and see the glorious future of Rome unfold before him. This was more than a dramatic story. It was a divine endorsement of Rome's destiny, with the Sibyl as the essential conduit to the realm of the dead. Her prophetic role, however, took on its most politically potent form with a separate prophecy, one that foretold a returning golden age. This was not a vague hope, but a specific vision of a new Saturnian era, a time of peace, prosperity, and moral renewal. When Augustus Caesar emerged as the first Roman emperor after decades of civil war, his supporters seized upon this Sibylline prophecy. They presented him not merely as a political leader, but as the fulfillment of a divine promise, the bringer of this prophesied golden age. The era of peace he established, the Pax Romana, was marketed as the direct result of this ancient prediction coming true. Poets like Virgil and Horace wove this narrative into their work, cementing the idea that Augustus's rule was preordained, a cosmic reset ordained by the gods and foretold by their most revered prophetess. This was propaganda of the highest order, using the authority of a 1,000-year-old seer to legitimize a new and fragile political system. Her image was forever immortalized by Michelangelo on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, placing her among the prophets and sibyls who foresaw the coming of Christ. In this, her legacy was secured not just as a guide for a mythical hero or a tool for emperors, but as a timeless symbol of prophetic wisdom, a woman whose voice, though faded, never truly fell silent. While the Sibyl's voice echoed through imperial halls, the peat bogs of the Scottish Highlands whispered their own prophecies through a man named Coinage Odhar, the Brahman seer. In the 17th century, this enigmatic figure was said to possess a small, smooth stone with a hole in its center, a seeing stone through which he could peer into the mists of time. His visions, passed down through generations of oral tradition, painted a vivid and often unsettling picture of a future Scotland. He spoke of a time when fire carts would race across the land without horses, a clear premonition of the railways that would one day stitch the nation together. He described the hills of Ross being strewn with ribbons, a poetic and accurate image of the roads and highways that would later crisscross the landscape. But his most famous and chilling prophecy was a personal one, directed at the powerful clan Mackenzie and their chief, the Earl of Seaforth. When the Earl was away in Paris, his wife, growing suspicious of his long absence, demanded the seer use his stone to spy on her husband. What Coinage Odhar saw and reported was the Earl's infidelity, a truth that so enraged the Countess that she accused the seer of witchcraft and sentenced him to a horrific death, burning alive in a tar barrel. As the flames were lit at Chanonry Point, the seer uttered his final, damning prophecy against the House of Seaforth. He foretold that the line would end with a deaf and dumb heir, that the last of the Seaforths would have 4 sons who would all die before him, and that the family's vast estates would be sold away, their power broken forever. History records that these events came to pass centuries later, with the last chief, Francis Humberston Mackenzie, being born deaf and mute and outliving all 4 of his sons. The grim accuracy of this prediction cemented the Brahman seer's legend, but it also raises a profound question about the nature of such folklore. Were these prophecies genuine visions recorded at the time, or were they stories and predictions woven into the historical record long after the events they supposedly foretold? The power of the Brahman seer lies not in their verifiable origin, but in how they gave a voice to the anxieties of the Highland people, predicting the profound changes of the industrial age and the collapse of the old clan systems with an eerie, enduring resonance. Far from the misty Scottish Highlands, a different kind of prophecy played out on the most isolated inhabited island on Earth. On Rapa Nui, known to the world as Easter Island, the age of the giant stone moe eventually gave way to a new and desperate form of divine selection. As the resources that fueled the statue-building culture dwindled, society underwent a dramatic transformation, turning from monolithic ancestor worship to a prophetic ritual that was both brutal and brilliant, the competition for the Tangata Manu, the birdman. Each year, the hope of the entire island focused on a tiny, fragile object, the first sooty-turn egg of the season, laid on the distant, treacherous offshore islet of Matu Nui. This was not merely a race, it was a divinely ordained prophecy in action, a way for the gods to physically reveal their chosen leader for the coming year. The competitors were not the aspiring leaders themselves, but their champions, powerful warriors called Hapu, who represented the island's most important clans. The ritual began at the sacred village of Orongo, perched on the razor-edge rim of the Rono Cow volcano. From this spiritual vantage point, the chiefs and priests would watch as their hapu made a terrifying descent down the sheer cliff face, a drop of nearly 1,000 feet to the churning ocean below. Their task was to then swim across a mile of open, shark-infested waters to Matu Nui, a jagged rock that offered no safe harbor. There they would wait, sometimes for weeks, living in cramped sea caves, exposed to the elements, all for the chance to spot that first precious egg. The moment a hapu secured the egg, his real test began. He had to safely traverse the shark-filled channel once more, then scale the treacherous cliff while signaling his success to those watching above. The man who presented the unbroken egg to his patron chief was not just a winner, he was a living vessel of divine will. His chief was immediately anointed as the new Tangata Manu, the birdman, a figure who wielded both spiritual and political authority for the next year. This prophecy-through ordeal was a radical reinvention of power. It replaced the inherited, static authority of the ancestral Moai builders with a system based on demonstrated courage, luck, and perceived divine favor. The entire ritual was a societal pressure valve, channeling the ambitions of rival clans into a single, spectacular competition rather than constant warfare. It was a prophecy that the entire community participated in, a collective breath held until the egg was safely delivered. This cycle of hope, danger, and renewal defined Rapa Nui for generations, a testament to a people's ability to forge a new kind of destiny when the old ways were no longer sustainable. What would you be willing to risk? What ocean would you swim for a chance to hear the gods speak your name? The prophecy of the Three Crowns was not a quiet hope, but a political thunderclap that would shape the ambitions of Europe for centuries. It envisioned a final, magnificent emperor, a last world emperor who would unite all of Christendom under a single, holy banner, defeat the forces of the Antichrist, and lay down his crown in Jerusalem at the end of days, ushering in the final judgment. This powerful medieval legend, often traced to the writings of the Tibetan Sibyl, contained a crucial and tantalizing detail. This emperor would be distinguished by his possession of 3 crowns. This triad of power was interpreted as the crowns of 3 great empires, a divine mandate to rule over a unified world. The first crown was that of the Franks or the Germans, the second was of the Romans, and the third, the most coveted, was the crown of a global Christian empire that had not yet been seen. This was not just a prediction, it was a call to action for the most powerful men of the age, a heavenly job description that kings and emperors were desperate to fulfill. The great Frankish King Charlemagne was one of the first rulers to have this prophetic mantle placed upon his shoulders. When Pope Leo III crowned him Holy Roman Emperor on Christmas Day in the year 800, it was seen by many as the first step in this prophetic fulfillment. He had united vast territories, championed the Church, and seemed to be the very figure destined to lead a renewed Christian empire. Centuries later, the brilliant and controversial Frederick II, the Holy Roman Emperor known as Stupa Mundi, the wonder of the world, actively cultivated the prophecy for his own ends. He was crowned King of the Germans, then Holy Roman Emperor, and he also secured the crown of Jerusalem through diplomacy rather than bloodshed, a feat that seemed to mirror the prophetic 3 crowns. He saw himself as this messianic emperor, a figure who would usher in a new age of peace and knowledge. His court in Sicily became a center of learning that drew from Christian, Muslim, and Jewish traditions, an attempt to embody the universal rule the prophecy foretold. The immense political power of this legend lay in its flexibility. It could be used by popes to control emperors, offering them the promise of divine destiny in exchange for obedience. It could also be used by emperors to challenge papal authority, positioning themselves as God's chosen instrument on earth above any mortal religious leader. The prophecy of the 3 crowns became a spiritual weapon, a narrative that could legitimize wars, sanction political marriages, and justify the concentration of unimaginable power. It was the ultimate political prize, a destiny written in the stars that every ambitious ruler wanted to claim as his own. What does it reveal about us that we so often dress our political ambitions in the robes of divine prophecy, seeking not just to rule a nation but to fulfill a cosmic story? A letter arrived in the courts of Europe, a document so extraordinary it seemed to rewrite the map of the entire world. Addressed to the Byzantine Emperor and the Pope, it was from a man who claimed to be Prester John, a Christian king of unimaginable power and piety, ruling over a vast empire in the distant lands beyond the Islamic world. He described a kingdom of such marvels it defied belief, a realm where pepper grew like forests, where rivers flowed with gemstones, and where the fountain of youth granted eternal life to his subjects. His palace was made of crystal, his scepter of solid emerald, and he presided over 72 kings as their overlord. Most importantly, he declared his divine mission to march westward, crush the Muslim powers and reclaim Jerusalem for Christendom. This was the prophecy Europe desperately wanted to hear, a beacon of hope during the grueling, often disastrous Crusades. The letter was a forgery, a masterful work of fiction, but its impact was utterly real. It gave a name and a location to a long-held dream, the hope that somewhere out there was a powerful Christian ally who would turn the tide of holy war. For centuries, the legend of this mythical king-priest fueled the European imagination, shifting locations with the geography of hope, first placed in India, then Central Asia, and finally, when no kingdom was found in the East, in the mysterious depths of Africa. The prophecy of Prester John's imminent aid became a driving force behind the age of exploration. Prince Henry, the navigator of Portugal, was deeply influenced by the legend, sending his caravels down the African coast not just for trade, but on a sacred quest to find Prester John's kingdom and forge a grand alliance that would encircle their Muslim rivals. Every new river mouth, every range of mountains held the potential to be the border of this lost Christian empire. The legend was a map drawn by desire, a prophecy that launched 1,000 ships. It tells us less about a real king and more about the profound power of a collective fantasy, a story so potent it could convince nations to risk everything on the chance that it might be true. What does it say about us that we are so willing to believe in a savior from a place that does not exist, simply because we need him to be there? A prophecy can turn a ship into a god. In the rich tapestry of Hawaiian mythology, the god Lono was a benevolent and essential force, the patron of agriculture, fertility, rainfall, music, and most importantly, peace. His presence was felt annually during the Makahiki season, a 4-month period from October through February. This was a sacred time when all war was forbidden, a societal pause dedicated to Lono that allowed the land and its people to rest and rejuvenate. The festival was marked by rituals, celebrations, and competitive games, all designed to honor the god and ensure his continued favor for the coming year. Central to this belief system was a powerful prophecy, a promise that Lono himself would one day return to the islands. The legends described his arrival in a very specific way. He would come on a floating island or on a great canoe with white sails like clouds. This was not a fearful prediction, but a hopeful one, the anticipated return of a divine bringer of peace and abundance. So when the British explorer Captain James Cook first made landfall in the Hawaiian Islands in January of 1778, the circumstances were almost unnervingly perfect. His 2 ships, the Resolution and the Discovery, arrived with their massive masts and broad white sails during the very heart of the Makahiki festival. To the Hawaiians observing from the shore, these vessels perfectly matched the description of the prophesied floating islands. Cook, with his commanding presence and the obvious reverence his crew showed him, was initially received not as a foreign explorer, but as the returned god Lono incarnate. He was greeted with prostrations and given the highest possible honors. The cultural collision was immediate and profound. The Hawaiians were acting within a deeply held religious framework, interpreting an unprecedented event through the lens of their most sacred prophecy. Cook and his men, however, were operating from a worldview of scientific discovery, colonial expansion, and trade. They accepted the adulation, perhaps out of confusion, perhaps out of a desire to facilitate peaceful resupply, but they fundamentally misunderstood the spiritual significance of the role they were being asked to play. This initial, tragic misunderstanding set the stage for a catastrophic chain of events. When Cook later departed, he conveniently did so near the end of the Makahiki period, when Lono was ritually symbolically sent away, further reinforcing the divine narrative in the minds of the Hawaiians. His return a few weeks later, however, was a different story. His ships arrived unexpectedly, and this time they were in dire need of repairs. A series of tensions escalated from the theft of a cutter boat to confrontations over resources. The Hawaiians' perception of Cook began to shift from divine to all too human. The prophecy that had initially ensured his welcome now complicated the breakdown in relations. The final, violent confrontation at Kilauea Bay, where Cook was killed, was a direct result of this collapsed narrative. The man they had thought was a god of peace was now just a mortal threat. The death of Captain Cook stands as a heartbreaking testament to the immense power and the immense danger of prophetic belief. It was a collision not just of two cultures, but of two entirely different realities, where a single, hopeful prediction paved the way for misunderstanding, violence, and the irreversible alteration of a way of life. It forces us to ask what happens when a prophecy comes true in the most literal, yet most misleading way possible. Her small house in the Bulgarian countryside became a crossroads for the future. Vangelia Gushtarova, known to the world as Baba Vanga, was a blind woman who lived a life of profound simplicity, yet her name is now synonymous with a vast and unsettling collection of prophecies for the modern age. Stricken blind as a young girl after a terrifying tornado, she claimed her lost sight was replaced with a new kind of vision, an ability to see through time itself. Those who sought her guidance would bring a lump of sugar, a personal item she would hold to supposedly connect with their essence and their fate. Her pronouncements were rarely straightforward, often delivered in a trance-like state as cryptic riddles and symbolic fragments. Her supporters point to a list of startling hits, claiming she foresaw the precise year of Joseph Stalin's death, the sinking of the Russian submarine Kursk, the September 11th attacks, and even the rise of the Islamic State. They speak of her predicting the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, describing a great wave covering a big coast with people and villages, and the Chernobyl disaster, which she allegedly called the Black Wound of the Earth. Her legacy, however, extends far beyond these retroactive attributions into a sprawling timeline of future events. She spoke of a time in the early 21st century when robots would dominate manufacturing, and a later period where humanity would make contact with alien civilizations. Her visions for the 22nd century grow even more dramatic, forecasting a world transformed by radical climate shifts and a final, great war that would be ended by a mysterious global illness. Skeptics, however, urge profound caution. They argue that her predictions are so vague and open-ended that they can be fitted to almost any major event after the fact, a process called post-diction. A phrase like "brothers of the same faith will fight" could be applied to countless civil wars, and a great wave could mean any tsunami or even a large military invasion. The lack of documented, specific predictions made before the events themselves is a major point of contention, so why does her legend persist with such strength? In an uncertain world of rapid technological and political change, Baba Vanga provides a framework, a narrative that suggests the chaos is part of a known, if frightening, pattern. She is a contemporary oracle for the digital age, her image shared across social media, her prophecies endlessly debated in online forums. She represents the timeless human need to believe that someone, somewhere, can see the road ahead, even if that road is lined with shadows and mystery. Her enduring power lies not in proven accuracy, but in the profound comfort and terror of having a map, however cryptic, for a future that often feels utterly unmapped. A single prophecy can ripple outward to touch millions, transforming the lives of 3 children into a global phenomenon of faith and fear. In 1917, in the rural fields of Fatima, Portugal, 3 young shepherd children, Lucia Santos and her cousins Francisco and Jacinta Mato, reported a series of encounters with a luminous lady who they said was the Virgin Mary. She entrusted them with 3 prophecies which became known as the 3 Secrets of Fatima, messages that would captivate the Catholic world for a century. The first secret was a terrifying vision of hell, shown to the children to inspire prayer and repentance for the salvation of sinners. The second secret was a stark geopolitical prediction, foretelling the end of the First World War, but also warning that a second, even worse war would break out under the next pope if humanity did not cease offending God. This prophecy specifically mentioned that to prevent this, Russia must be consecrated to her Immaculate Heart. When World War II began in 1939, many believers saw this as a chilling and precise fulfillment. But it was the third secret that became the source of intense global speculation and intrigue. Written down by Lucia and sealed away in the Vatican archives, it was not officially revealed until the year 2000. The Vatican's interpretation described a bishop clothed in white, climbing a steep mountain amid the ruins of a city, and being killed by a group of soldiers who fired bullets and arrows at him. This was widely understood to be a prophecy of the attempted assassination of Pope John Paul II on May 13, 1981, the very anniversary of the first Fatima apparition. The Pope himself credited Our Lady of Fatima with saving his life, and he later placed the bullet that nearly killed him in the crown of her statue at the sanctuary. Yet, the official interpretation has not satisfied everyone. Some theologians and devotees believe the third secret was not revealed in its entirety, suggesting it also contains prophecies of a great apostasy and crisis within the Catholic Church itself. The enduring power of the Fatima prophecies lies in this potent combination of the verifiable and the mysterious, the second secret's apparent accuracy and the third secret's connection to a globally witnessed event gave immense weight to the entire message, inspiring a deep and lasting devotion that draws millions of pilgrims to the site each year. These prophecies are not relics of a distant past, they are living texts, their meaning still debated in the context of modern wars and religious turmoil. They force a difficult question: are we reading the signs correctly, or is there a part of the message, a final warning that we have yet to fully understand? The final legend brings us to the high mesas of the American Southwest, where the Hopi people have safeguarded a prophecy not of a single event, but of an entire moral journey for humanity. For the Hopi, time is not a straight line but a series of worlds, each one ending when its people stray too far from the sacred path of balance. We are living now in the fourth world, and the signs foretelling its culmination are not hidden in riddles but are written plainly in the events we have all witnessed. They spoke of a gourd of ashes that would fall from the sky, a weapon so devastating it would scorch the earth and poison the air. When the first atomic bomb flashed over the New Mexico desert, the Hopi elders recognized the fulfillment of this sign, a terrible manifestation of humanity's imbalance. They also foretold the construction of a great web that would be spun around the entire planet, a web through which people would speak to one another. The rise of the global internet was seen as another clear marker, a powerful tool that could either connect us in wisdom or entangle us in distraction and falsehood. Perhaps the most poignant sign is the prophecy of a dwelling place in the sky, a blue star that would one day appear. When the International Space Station began to orbit the Earth, its solitary light tracing a path across the night, the Hopi saw another piece of their ancient timeline click into place. But these prophecies are not a fatalistic countdown to doom. They are a diagnosis and a prescription. The end of the fourth world is described as a purification, a necessary cleansing that will sweep away the corruption and greed that have thrown the natural world into chaos. The Hopi message is that we still have a choice. The path of the corn, the way of simple living, respect for the earth, and community harmony remains open. By rejecting materialism and returning to a life of spiritual alignment, humanity can navigate the coming turmoil and emerge into a fifth world of peace. This final legend reframes the very idea of prophecy. It is not a spectator sport where we wait passively for a predicted future to arrive. It is a mirror held up to our collective soul, a call to action written in the language of time itself. The Hopi ask us to look at the world we have built and to ask ourselves one essential question: are we walking the path that leads to life, or the one that leads only to the end of a world? From the whispers of the Pythia to the visions of the Hopi, these 30 legends reveal a truth that spans every continent and culture. Prophecy is a fundamental thread in the fabric of human history, a universal response to our deepest fears and highest hopes. We have used these divine messages to make sense of a chaotic world, to explain the rise and fall of empires, to find courage in the face of invasion, and to anchor our identities in a cosmos that often feels vast and indifferent. Whether carved into temple stone at Delphi, chanted by a völva in the frozen north, or carried across a desert in search of an eagle, these stories share powerful common themes. They offer warnings that steer us from hubris and hope that promises renewal after destruction. They explore the tension between destiny and free will, questioning whether our path is set in stone or written by our own hands in response to a whispered suggestion. They all speak to that timeless, aching desire to reach beyond our mortal limits and touch the mind of the divine, to get a glimpse of the map before we have to walk the entire road. So we are left with one final, haunting question. Do these ancient prophecies reveal a predetermined fate, a script we are merely acting out, or are they themselves the catalysts, powerful stories that, once spoken, begin to shape the very future they claim to only predict? The answer may be as complex and personal as the legends themselves. We would love to hear which of these incredible prophecies captured your imagination the most. Share your favorite legendary prediction or your own thoughts on fate and destiny in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey through the mysteries of divine foresight, please like this video and subscribe for more explorations into the incredible stories of our past.